Improving your communications is one of the most important things you need to think about in order to get your ideas heard. But how and where do you start? It can be overwhelming. I get it. I used to feel this way too. Hi, my name is Jessica Chen, and I'm the founder and CEO of Soulcast Media, a business communications agency. As a former television news reporter to now working with clients and businesses on strategic communications, it's something I think about all the time. In this video, you're going to learn how to ask the right questions, tailor your message to the right audience, and feel confident communicating whether this is on video or in person. Join me as you learn to speak up at work. Step into a performance review and chances are your boss might say they want you to speak up more. But miscommunication or a lack of communication is actually one of the biggest problems many companies face. And just wanting to be a better communicator isn't as easy as just a click of a button. There are reasons why many of us feel challenged in wanting to speak up. And this is what I call mental barriers. We all have mental barriers, and they stem from experiences that we've had. Did someone once criticize your presentation? Did somebody once say you sounded funny? All these thoughts stay with us, and that is mental barriers. And the thing is, if you want to be a better communicator, you have to start by identifying where those mental barriers come from and how you can use it to help you and not hurt you. But the thing is, you can improve. In fact, I'm living proof of that. It wasn't until I was able to identify my own personal mental barriers that I was able to take those experiences to help me and not hurt me. In our next videos, I'll start to identify and introduce to you what are the 3 most common mental barriers that we all have, so that you can think about how you can identify it so that it can help you and not hurt you. How you were raised, your family, your cultural values, they stick with us as we enter into the business world. Perhaps you were told to be a good kid, be obedient, don't speak up over elders. That might have served us well in our younger years, but they don't necessarily set us up for success as we enter the business world. For example, I was working with a client recently, and he was telling me that he grew up understanding that he should be an obedient kid, that he should never speak up over someone who was older than him because it would be seen as disrespectful. But fast forward to him now working at his job, he has a lot of trouble talking to his boss or speaking up in a meeting. But the thing is, until we were able to identify those cultural and family barriers, he wasn't able to free himself from some of those beliefs. And speaking of cultural influences, perhaps you grew up in an environment where you were compared a lot to your peers, or you were criticized really often, or perhaps you didn't receive a lot of positive reinforcement. These cultural norms can really shape how we express ourselves now. But in the working world, expressing yourself and showcasing your ideas is really important in order for you to get ahead. If being direct isn't necessarily your style, perhaps focus on things like building your credibility or spending the time to prepare your messaging. The thing is, what might have helped you succeed in your younger years may not necessarily be helping you succeed in the working world today. The key is being able to separate those two things in order for you to get ahead at work. Did you have a bad experience once speaking up at work and that pretty much scared you in not wanting to speak up again? Did you do a presentation once and you felt like it was such a nerve-wracking experience? Or did you speak up once in a meeting and you felt that everybody was just looking at you funny? These negative experiences and feelings, they tend to stick with us a bit longer than positive experiences. But the thing is, even though they may have been bad experiences, you can't let those experiences cripple us from moving forward. So how do you separate yourselves from the past experiences that you had so that you can move forward? There are a few things to think about. If you know you're going to be walking into a meeting and it's important for you to speak up, but you just keep thinking about the last time you spoke up, just remember that that was then and this is now. It's a brand new day and it's a brand new opportunity. Or perhaps you're about to give a presentation and you keep thinking about how nerve-wracking the last time felt. Just remember that chances are the people who were there listening to your last presentation, they probably don't even remember it because as humans, our memory, it's fleeting. So just focus on your presentation today and doing the best you can. Now, there are 3 things for you to think about in order to actively prepare yourself to speak up more confidently. And the 3 points are, number 1 is to really practice speaking up. Practicing is so important in preparing your messaging. The second one is focusing on your energy and making sure that your energy is up to keep it engaging. And the third is, if you are doing a presentation, asking a coworker or colleague for feedback on it so you can prepare yourself before you actually give the presentation. Again, we are all shaped by our experiences, both good and bad, but recognizing the bad experiences that might hold us back and separating ourselves is key in order to move forward. Part of navigating through life is figuring out how to use our voice strategically, meaning how can we use our voice to get what we want, to express our opinions, or to simply get things done. But the problem is a lot of us focus more on what we want to say versus how we should say it, meaning a lot of us just first speak, wait for others to react, and then we tailor our message. In fact, that should be flipped. We should be focusing on how we want to tailor our message first, and then we speak. No wonder so many of us get frustrated in not getting our ideas heard. Now, in order to be a strategic communicators, there are 3 things we want to focus on, and we call this the SCP, the Strategic Communications Path. And following this path is key in using your voice as an asset. The 3 elements are, number 1, is focusing on creating the environment you want. The second is figuring out what role you want to play. And the third is figuring out your energy level. When you focus on these 3 things, you are approaching communications in a strategic way. Some of the best communicators out there are really good at creating the environment they want when they are engaging in conversations. And the different environments can be a warm environment, meaning you really want everyone around you to feel comfortable in expressing yourselves. Or you're trying to create an environment that is more serious because you guys are about to tackle a serious conversation. As a strategic communicator, this is absolutely in your control. Once you've identified the environment you want to create for others around you, the next thing to think about is the role you want to play, meaning what is your value add? What is one bit of information you know more than everyone else in that room? That is the information and role you're going to play in that environment. And depending on that environment, your role can change as well, meaning one time your role can be the motivator in the group, or maybe you can be the data person. Or perhaps your role can simply be you just contributing additional information. But once you have your role established, the next thing you want to think about is your energy level. This is really important because depending on the energy level you bring, that can really shape the type of conversation you're going to have. And that means your energy level can be high intentionally. And this is really good when you are trying to engage and motivate the group. Or if you want a more medium energy level, this is more if you want to get a level-headed conversation going. Or if your energy level is low, this is good when you're trying to convey a more serious conversation. And this is where the tone of voice is really important. But the key here is if you want to be a strategic communicator and use your voice as an asset, you want to think about the SCP, the Strategic Communications Path, and the environment, the role, and the energy you're bringing into every conversation that you're having. In the previous video where I talked about how you can use your voice as an asset, I pointed out how depending on the role you play, it makes a huge difference in the environment you're creating and the energy level you're bringing. But what is also really important in being a strategic and confident communicator is preparing your message. The simpler and more concise your message is, the farther the message will go. In fact, a lot of people actually do the opposite. A lot of people just talk, and the more they talk, the more unsure they sound, and the more confused other people get. So in order to prepare your message, you want to ask yourself this question: how can you express that same thought in a more simple and concise way? In fact, when I was a former television news reporter, this was something I would ask myself all the time. I would ask myself, how can I convey the story, the concept, the issue in a much simpler, concise way so that someone younger or with less experience could easily understand it? By simply asking myself that one question, it made a huge difference in how I presented the message. So let's say you are preparing a conversation where your intention is to motivate those in this conversation. So how can you challenge yourself to simplify the message? You want to ask yourselves these two questions. The first one is, what is the most interesting part of that message? You want to lead with that because that'll capture their attention. The second question you want to ask yourself is, what is the takeaway point that you want others to leave with? That is how you want to end your message. By asking yourselves these two questions, you'll be able to identify what is the most critical part. Preparing your message so that it is simple and concise is really important in you being able to be a strategic and effective communicator. When you step into a meeting, whether it's with one person or with a group of people, how effectively you communicate largely dictates the direction of that meeting. Yes, you have the power to do that. But for many of us, the thought of speaking up in a meeting can be crippling. I get it. You just don't know how your message or your thought is going to be perceived or received. So let's talk about how you can begin to prepare yourself to speak up in a meeting. There are a few things to think about. The first thing you want to consider is mentally preparing yourself to speak up and getting rid of the idea that you need to be validated once you express your idea. Meaning, if there is silence after you share your idea, that is okay. In fact, in a lot of video remote work, when you're in a virtual room with many other people, after you speak up, there may be silence, but it is okay, and that shouldn't deter you from sharing your ideas. The next thing with mentally preparing yourself is to actually challenge yourself to do it. So telling yourself, hey, I gotta say at least one thing in the meeting. In fact, the earlier on you speak up in a meeting, the easier it's going to be, because chances are if you wait too long, you might convince yourself to not do it at all. If creating bullet points will help you prepare your message, then certainly do that as well. The next thing you want to think about is your value add, meaning what role do you want to play in this meeting? And you can figure out your value add by identifying what is one thing or one insight you know that other people in the meeting may not know. And that is something that you can share in the meeting when you speak up. The third way for you to speak up in a meeting and to do it in a less direct way is perhaps posing your thought as a question. For example, if you're in a meeting and you're sensing that the conversation is going in one direction, but you don't necessarily agree with that, you can speak up and pose it as a question by saying, hey guys, I know we are talking about plan A, but here are some of my concerns and maybe we can consider plan B. What do you all think? By posing it as a question, you are being less forceful and less direct, but you are still expressing your idea. In the end, speaking up in a meeting is really important for you to get the recognition you deserve. Figuring out your talking points, your value add, and even posing your thoughts as a question, these are great ways for you to start thinking about how you can effectively speak up in a meeting. Your boss schedules a meeting with you, and immediately your heart starts pounding. What do they want to talk about? What did I do wrong? These are really natural things that may run through your mind. But being able to confidently communicate to your boss is really important in how they perceive you. So you just want to remember a few things when you start to get nervous thinking about having to talk with your boss. The first thing is you have to remember they're humans. They're just like us. They have likes, they have quirks, they have dislikes. So just remembering that can help ease some of that anxiety when speaking with them. The second thing is You may be walking into a meeting and you're afraid that they may be giving you constructive feedback, and that may be hard to hear and digest. But you just have to think about it that they're trying to help improve you so that you can be a better and more efficient worker. Now that you're about to approach that conversation with your boss, you want to figure out how you can communicate on their level. And this is what I call the 4 power pillars and being able to identify what they are with your boss. So the first thing you want to consider is, what is your boss's communication style and preference? Meaning, do they prefer shorter emails, emails that are more concise, or do they prefer emails with a lot more context and information? Whatever it is that they like, you want to tailor your message to that. The second thing you want to think about is offering solutions and not just problems. Meaning, if you're working on something and you are starting to sense that you are going to be hitting a wall soon, or you really don't know how to tackle this problem, instead of just saying, hey, I have this problem, can you help me? Try to take a few steps back and think, okay, how can I solve this problem first, and perhaps offer options and then present it to your boss. Being able to do that not only shows you being proactive, but it also shows your critical thinking skills. And number 3, no surprises, meaning you don't want your boss finding out information from someone else when it has to do with you. For example, let's say you're working on a project or you're given information that they don't know about yet. Instead of just throwing that information at them and just saying a quick FYI, summing it up in a high-level sentence or 2 can really go a long way. Or better yet, putting it all in one email so you don't inundate their inbox. Or number 4, say their name. I know it sounds kind of strange, but if you're able to say your boss's name when you're engaging in conversation with them, it not only shows your comfort level, but it also shows your presence around them. For example, if you're seeing your boss, you can say, hey Ken, really good to see you. Or, that's a really great idea, Ken. Have you also thought about this? There's something about saying someone's name as you're engaging in conversation with them that not only shows you're comfortable, but that you're confident. When you're communicating with your boss, it certainly can be nerve-wracking and you can certainly feel anxious about it. But just reminding yourself that, hey, they're just like us, and remembering the 4 power pillars and how you approach communicating with them, it can not only make you feel more confident, but more comfortable. Communications is not a one-size-fits-all model. In fact, effective communications requires you to think about what your audience cares about. So this requires you to think about what is your dynamic in relation to them and what is on their mind. I'm going to introduce to you 3 different dynamics you want to think about before you approach any conversations. The first is, if you're about to speak with somebody who is above you, for example, your boss or your client that you're working with, chances are they're thinking, are you going to be offering them good information? Are you going to be taking up their time, or are you going to be saving them time? This requires you to build credibility fast. When it comes to communications, you want to keep your conversations and information concise and high level so they feel you've done your homework ahead of time. The second dynamic you want to think about is speaking with those who are on your level, for example, your peers. What they're thinking about is whether or not you are trustworthy. This requires you to be able to be a little bit more vulnerable with your peers. So share some thoughts that you're having about a project you're working on, or even ask for their input on it. The third dynamic you want to think about is speaking with those who are more junior than you. Some of the things that are going through their mind is they want to know whether or not you care about them. So you can share the vision of the project you're asking them to do. This will help motivate and inspire them to get the work done for you. Now that you know the 3 different dynamics to consider, tailor your communications and conversations around what they care about to make you a stronger and more effective communicator. Taking the initiative to speak up doesn't only need to happen in meetings. In fact, engaging in small talk is a great way to build rapport. But a lot of people say that they get stuck whenever they ask the question, "How are you?" and the other person only responds with the word "good." This is where I introduce the concept of asking smart questions and using power words as you engage in conversations. What I mean by smart questions is you want to ask questions that doesn't result in only one word answers. So when the person responds with the answer good, you want to start thinking about other things you can ask them. For example, what brought you to this event? Or how's that project you've been working on? Or do you have any plans over the weekend? The beauty of asking smart questions is it also allows you to share a bit about yourself and show some personality. For example, you can share your thoughts about where they're going over the weekend, or you can add your insight on the project that they're working on. When it comes to power words, these are strategic words you can use as you engage in conversations that evoke an emotional and psychological response whenever they're listening to you use those power words. And what I mean by power words are saying things like, I was really excited about this. That project got me really frustrated. Whenever you use power words, it unconsciously perks up the other person's ears and makes them want to engage with you more. So, the beauty of engaging in small talk is that you can develop rapport with those you're conversing with. You just have to keep in mind asking smart questions and using power words in your conversations. Now that we reviewed how to speak up strategically at work, let's go through a mental checklist of sorts so you can review how to speak up confidently in your next conversations. The first thing you want to think about is if you are feeling like you're struggling to speak up, think back on some of those mental barriers that might have held you back. For example, things that were uncomfortable in the past or things that might not have been pleasant experiences. It's okay to let that go in order to move ahead. The next thing you want to think about is your audience and what is it that they care about and their dynamic to you. Approaching your conversation with them in mind will make your communications much stronger. The third thing you want to think about is practice, practice, practice. And finally, when you are engaging in small talk with those at work, just remember to ask smart questions and use power words. Now that you have a holistic understanding of what it takes to speak up strategically at work, you can go in feeling confident whether you are speaking in person or on video. If you want to take a deeper dive on how to communicate well on video, you can check out my other LinkedIn Learning course, Developing Executive Presence on Video Conference Calls. Thank you so much for watching this LinkedIn Learning course. Happy communicating.